Right now, there's a piece of Indian engineering running inside almost every 5G phone on the planet, and almost nobody knows it. India did that once, quietly, with 5G. Now it's trying to do it again, at a much bigger scale, with 6G. Here's the real story of how and whether it'll actually work. Before we get to 6G, you need to understand why standards even matter. Every phone, tower, and network on Earth follows the same technical rulebook, written by two bodies, 3GPP and the IT. 3GPP writes the actual technical specifications, the exact engineering rules a 5G or 6G network has to follow. The ITU, a United Nations body, decides what counts as 6G in the first place and sets the minimum bar every technology has to clear. Whoever gets their ideas embedded into these rule books doesn't just get bragging rights. Every company on Earth building 6G hardware has to build around those rules for a decade or more. For decades, India sat on the sidelines of this process. That's changing, and there's proof it can actually work. In 2017, a team at IIT Hyderabad, working with IIT Madras and CE-WIT, proposed something unusual to the ITU, a mandatory requirement for large rural cells, so 5G towers could cover far more ground without adding more infrastructure. That proposal became India's own 5G standard, known as 5GI. In 2020, the ITU formally approved it, the first Indian mobile technology ever recognized in a UN standards recommendation. The core innovation was a modulation technique called Pi by 2 BPSK, engineering language for a way to let phones transmit at higher effective power without extra battery drain, roughly doubling how far a signal could reach. By 2021, 3GPP and India's standards body agreed to merge 5GI directly into the global 5G specification, Release 17. Since 2022, that same modulation scheme has shipped inside billions of 5G devices worldwide. So this isn't India hoping to influence global standards, it already has. The question now is whether it can do that again deliberately and at scale. That's where the Bharat 6G alliance comes in. It grew out of the Technology Innovation Group on 6G, set up by India's Department of Telecommunications back in 2021 to build a national 6G vision. The alliance itself launched in 2023, and by mid-2026 had grown to 90 member organizations, all working under 7 specialized working groups. Here's what each one actually does. Working Group 1, Spectrum, which develops India's roadmap for accessing and harmonizing the airwaves 6G will need. Working Group 2, Device Technology, Sensors and Manufacturing, which builds India's domestic capability to actually make 6G chips and hardware, not just design them. Working Group 3, Technology, the group most directly responsible for coordinating India's technical contributions to 3GPP and the ITU. Working Group 4, Applications, focus on making sure India doesn't just adopt 6G, but actually builds the use cases that benefit from it. Working Group 5, Green and Sustainability, pushing for energy-efficient 6G infrastructure instead of networks that just consume more power than the last generation. Working Group 6, Outreach, which builds partnerships with global 6G alliances, the same group behind agreements like the Delhi Declaration, which we'll get to shortly. And Working Group 7, 6G use cases and revenue streams, focused on the business models that actually make 6G commercially viable, not just technically impressive. In other words, the alliance isn't the one submitting technical papers to 3GPP. Indian companies and universities do that work directly. The alliance organizes it, tracks it, and makes sure India shows up as one coordinated voice. So has that coordination actually produced results? The numbers say yes. India's participation in 3GPP grew from 717 delegates in 2020 to nearly 1,800 in 2025. More importantly, technical contributions, the actual proposals submitted, jumped from 196 to nearly 3,000 in that same 5-year window. Zooming into just one recent quarter, April to June 2026, Indian organizations logged 270 total standards contributions, 234 to 3GPP, 10 to the ITU's Radio Standards Group, and the rest split across other bodies. 2 names show up again and again in that data. Tegas Networks, contributing over 100 of those submissions alone, and CE-WIT, alongside multiple IITs. This isn't one government office, it's a genuine industry and academia effort. Here's the biggest concrete win so far. Back in December 2023, The ITU finalized its official vision for 6G, and it recognizes exactly 6 official usage scenarios that every future 6G technology must be designed around. One of those 6 is called Ubiquitous Connectivity, and it exists because India pushed hard for it. It means every 6G technology proposal from any country now has to prove it can serve rural and remote populations, not just dense cities. That's a rare thing. A rural connectivity requirement written permanently into a global technical standard instead of being treated as a local charity problem. But getting a requirement accepted is very different from getting your specific technology chosen to meet it. And that's where this gets genuinely uncertain. Here's the timeline nobody outside the industry tracks. 3GPP's actual 6G specification work is only in early stages right now. Concrete specs aren't expected until release 21, around 2027 to 2028. The ITU won't even start formally evaluating candidate 6G technologies until its working group meets in early 2027, and won't make a final decision on what officially counts as 6G until around 2030. So India has years left to prove its technology choices, not just its requirements, make it into the final standard. That's a much higher bar than getting a usage scenario accepted. And India isn't alone in this race. That's exactly why, in October 2025, the Bharat 6G Alliance signed the Delhi Declaration with 9 other global 6G alliances, from the US to Japan to Brazil. The stated goal behind all of this is bold. India wants roughly 10% of the world's 6G patents by 2030. As of late 2025, officials cited around 4,000 patents already contributed toward that target. Why does that matter economically? Because with both 4G and 5G, India was mostly a buyer of other countries' technology. If even a fraction of that 10% target lands, it flips India from paying licensing fees to collecting them. So where does that leave things? India has real verified proof it can do this. 5GI already happened. It has real coordination infrastructure now in the Bharat 6G Alliance and its 7 working groups. And it has one genuine global standards win already banked. What it doesn't have yet is a finished 6G technology chosen by 3GPP or the ITU, and that decision is still years away. If you want the full context, the spectrum roadmap, and what the alliance actually is, check the first 2 videos in this series linked below. Subscribe to Techtonic for what happens next.